Welcome to question 79 of the secundae. This topic is the quasi-integral parts of justice, and I am Dr. Thibault. Quasi-integral parts of justice have two elements. They're integral because they are built in, they're necessary parts of justice. They exist in doing good and declining from evil, or another way of saying that is avoiding evil. So do good and avoid evil. That is essential to doing justice. They have opposite virtue. They have opposite vices, which is transgression and omission. So if you fail to decline from evil, then you transgress. And if you fail to do good, then you've committed an omission. And they are required for, these things are part of aiming at the perfect act of justice. So a perfect act of justice would be owing to another what is due, and it is doing good to another, and it is declining from doing evil to another. So these are really very simple concepts when you think about it. In a general sense, doing good and avoiding evil is part of all virtues, but it's specific also to justice in respect to human and divine laws. So when there are particular laws and rules of society, then if you don't follow the law, then you transgress the law, whether it's divine or human. And if you don't do the good that's required by the law, which is affirmative, then you are also violating the law. So this, although doing good is not limited to justice, it is specifically used in this way in regards to justice. Therefore, justice is a special virtue with regards to doing good to one's neighbor. Therefore, these are also then special vices by omission and transgression because they are a violation of special virtues. How is justice special? Well, this has already been covered, but if you haven't seen the previous videos, giving one their due is specific. It's a special virtue because it's not general. You don't apply it equally in every way to everyone in a generalized fashion, but it's specific. So the justice you owe to your wife is different than the justice you owe to your butcher, and it's different than the justice you owe to your government, which is different than the justice you owe to your neighbor. So they all have to be done specifically in order for you to give one their due. The question is, what is one's due? Well, it depends on your relationship to that person. There's some things which are general, but other things to be properly due would depend on who they are compared to you. This aims at proper equality, which is giving their due, given their status within society and within your relationship to them. Transgression, as mentioned, is a special sin because it violates a special virtue of justice. A person transgresses in bodily movement when one steps graditur, beyond trans, a fixed boundary. So one transgresses when one goes beyond, steps beyond the boundary in a physical sense. So this is dealing with transgression in a spiritual or civil sense, and it is the boundary. To go beyond a particular boundary is to enter into sin. So you cannot steal, or you can touch your neighbor's belongings, but you can't steal your neighbor's belongings. So as soon as you take it, now you have violated the boundary of what is allowed. So it is using an example from the word in a physical sense to show what it means in a civil or spiritual sense. Transgression is an act against a negative precept. There's a lot of double negatives within this question. A negative precept would be like within the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not steal. So that's a negative precept. A precept is a law. So it's a negative law saying, do not do this. So if you transgressed, it means you did do this. So it says, thou shalt not steal, and you steal. You have violated the negative precept of thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not do drugs. Thou shalt not murder. Right? If you've done these things, now you have transgressed it. Now, omission is also a special sin because it is the non-fulfillment of good that is due to another. So there's less laws I can give as an example of things that you must do. But for example, one would be that you should go to celebrate the Mass on Sunday. This is a divine law. Celebrate the Mass on Sunday to give thanks to God. Well, if you do not go to Mass, now that is not a transgression in and of itself, it's an omission. You fail to do a good which you ought to have done. This, going to Mass is a good due to God. So you didn't do this good for God that you ought to do. Therefore, it's an omission. Now, if you also then go out and you didn't go out because you're out partying and doing bad things, well, then that might also be a transgression. So the reason why you didn't go out might be a transgression, but then missing the Mass would also be an omission. So as an example of somebody went out partying and transgressing in one way, but then they go home and their friend wakes them up and says, wait, you have to get up. Mass is in a half hour. Get up, get up, get up. And they wake the person out of a drunken slumber, and the person goes to Mass. Well, now the person is not guilty of an omission because they went, right? So they might be still be guilty of the transgression, but not the omission, because as long as they perform their duty, then they have not committed an omission. Now you couldn't go, there are higher ideals of being at Mass and being attentive and participating. There's a question whether or not the person can properly participate and give thanks in that state, but they were at least there. Um, um, and for it to be an omission, it has to be something which is at all possible, right? So if you were to say, well, there's this person in need, they're on the top of the building, and the building's on fire. Well, unless I'm Superman, there's nothing I can do about that. So, I just say, I looked up and I saw the person, so I said a prayer, but I didn't climb the wall of the outside of the building. Well, I don't have the ability. That's not possible for me. So you're only required to do what you're actually able to do. I said, as opposed to affirmative precepts. An affirmative precept would be something positive, not a thou shalt not, but a thou shalt. Thou shalt honor your parents, right? That's in there. Keep holy the Sabbath. Those are two affirmative precepts within the Ten Commandments. So if you don't honor the Sabbath and you don't honor your parents, well, now you have violated an affirmative precept. Which is worse, a transgression or an omission? These are sometimes kind of funny questions because you shouldn't do either. They're both vices, so you should instead do good and avoid evil. That's the virtue. So you probably shouldn't do either. But which one is worse? Well, St. Thomas, when he says these things, he's usually saying all things being equal. All things being equal, it is a graver sin to not to refrain from evil using the deed of transgression. So it is worse to revile your parents, right, than it would be the omission of not honoring your parents. So not honoring your parents, what could that be? Well, that could be playing video games on your phone at dinner, right? That could be an omission of honoring your parents versus reviling your parents, publicly scolding them, making up stories about them in front of other people. It's far worse to publicly dishonor your parents than it is to, within the privacy of your home, just be inattentive on your cell phone. So there is a difference. Um, but as he points out, these are broad senses, right? So uh, something like dishonoring your parents could be a very small thing, depending on the situation, right? It could be a very small thing, like uh, your birthday card wasn't thoughtful enough, right? It could be something so small. It could become a very venial sin. And in that case, if you're looking at a very, if you're looking at one situation, a very venial transgression versus a very blatant omission, then maybe the omission is worse than the transgression, right? Like, so if you look at the honoring your parents, well, if if your parents are in a desperate need, and you don't do anything to help. Well, now their life is at risk. An elderly parent, for example, not getting care. Right? Well, that's a very serious thing compared to something which could potentially be a very small reviling or very small backbiting. Um, you shouldn't do either. You shouldn't do either. In conclusion, looking at these quasi-integral parts of justice, they are doing good and avoiding evil. And then the opposite vices are transgression and omission. Those are Articles 2 and 3. And then lastly, Article 4 was all things being equal, what's worse? And St. Thomas says, in general, transgression is worse because it's actually expending energy to do something wrong versus omission, which is doing nothing, which is still an act of the will, but it's not as bad as putting energy into doing the wrong thing. So that's all I have for quasi-integral parts of justice. We'll be moving on to potential parts next time on a very short section. Thank you.